Captain Kirk,
Yes.
I'd be honored if you'd give the order to get underway.
No.
Please, I insist.
Take us out.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist of the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City. And now, somewhere along the Alpha Quadrant, it's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Little bummed. Not going to lie, a little bummed. This marks the end of an era for us.
We did 7 Star Trek movies.
7
This is our 7th
Star Trek movies.
movie. I've learned so much. I'm officially a Trekkie.
Yeah.
Did I earn?
Yes.
Am I Trek? How,
I don't know. It depends. It depends on how this conversation goes. This is the.
Oh, it's going to go super well.
This is, you know what's funny about this conversation is that it's going to go off the rails.
Oh, no.
Because up to a certain point, much of what we say will be in line with one another. And after a certain point, it could go in 2 totally different directions. I don't know yet because we've not discussed it. We did just watch the movie together. We've not discussed our own thoughts on it. Before we get started on Star Trek Generations, a couple things that I need to bring up. One, our poll at the time of this recording is still going. It ends tomorrow at noon. And I was ready to go ahead and say who was going to win between Harley Quinn Season 1 and X-Men The Animated Series Season 1 until 5 minutes before we pressed record, and I saw that the poll was now at a dead tie. So we'll find out. What?
This was
Again.
this was the tiebreaker.
Yeah, this was the tiebreaker, and now it's at a complete dead heat again. And so we will know definitively by noon tomorrow what we're covering. So folks who are interested, they should stay tuned to our social medias. We'll give you those social media handles later in the episode. But it could go either way. Harley Quinn Season 1, X-Men The Animated Series Season 1. And I think it's safe to say that we're excited about covering either of them.
It's fascinating because there's 30 years difference between these 2 shows, roughly, right?
Yeah. And yet same number of episodes per season. So no matter which one we got, it would start and end at the exact same time. It is interesting.
It's really a classic DC versus Marvel debate, isn't it?
Oh, isn't it? I would also like to say that we are super excited about the possibility of covering either of these, but not nearly as excited as a certain listener who has been sending us, or I guess I should say listeners, who have been sending us SpeakPipe messages, giving their thoughts on who or on what we should cover. I have a little supercut of those listeners right here. Let's take a quick listen to this.
Hey guys, first time caller, long time listener. Hey Arkham Sessions, this is a different guy. Hello Arkham Sessions, my name's John Lennon. You might remember me from the Beatles.
I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise.
Hello. I am Russian man. My name is Vladimir Stenchik.
I vote for Harley Quinn.
I'd really like to hear about Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn.
Really want to hear your opinions on Harley Quinn show. And смотря стран, я потрала сарта. And I'm not the guy that called last night. I've tried to do this more times than I'd like to admit.
Okay. All right. So
That was great. I love it.
Definitely
That's some
not
talent
the
right
same
there.
person. We got these over the course of 2 or 3 days that just message after message after message. And just had a ball listening to them. Such a great time for us. So we appreciate that. And we are going to reach out to you because you deserve an enamel pin regardless of who wins. And by the time this episode goes up, we will know, but you won't yet. So stay tuned. But
hey, and if folks want to send us messages, this is a super easy process. You just go to my website, drdreapsychology.com. There's a button that you press. It just says submit message. You just record it over your device, your laptop, your computer.
Yeah.
And there's a 2-minute limit. But we love receiving messages, whether they're considerations about what shows are coming up, ideas, theories, maybe a deeper dive. I love hearing feedback from people on maybe the relationships, characters, or ideas we're sharing on the show, and they have an idea or deeper thoughts about what we're talking about. Some of them do get aired, not all of them do, but we love it. So please continue to submit your messages to us.
And as you can hear, you can certainly fit a lot into 2 minutes. So we're looking forward to hearing from all of you. Go and do that.
Right.
Also, I should say, obviously, the folks who are voting on these shows are our patrons. Additionally, over at Patreon, you and I have been posting every Monday sort of blogs on what we're reading. Currently, we're reading a lot of the One Bad Day hardcover graphic novels that cover Batman's rogues. Every Monday, we've been updating with the latest one and our thoughts on those. Got a few more of those coming up. I've been putting up videos of things, whether it's anything from Hallmark ornaments that we've been getting and opening, to the Batman cowl from Pure Arts and the Catwoman cowl from Pure Arts that we just recently got. Our reviews of those things are also available to our patrons of a certain tier. So go over to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, check it out, determine what tier you would like to join. Anywhere from $1 to I think $30 is the most, and that's like for one of our last few challenge coins. But yeah, come join in the fun over there. I want to talk about Star Trek, Drea. Do you want to hear what my first relationship to this movie was?
Yeah.
This movie came out in 1994. I was working it came out in November of 94. I was a senior in high school. That summer, I had been working my job as Yogi Bear at a local theme park. And that was a Paramount-owned theme park. We had Star Trek characters
right
roaming around the streets, including Klingons. One of those Klingons was a friend of mine, Eric O'Brien. He had gotten his hands on the screenplay to this movie and had brought it to the park.
Wow.
And had loaned it to me so that I could read it. This was before the internet was really like a place where you could just find anything and everything. It was certainly before an Ain't It Cool News and stuff like that. Like, I was genuinely more aware of what was going on in this movie months ahead of its release than like anybody, unless you were working on the movie. Certain changes were made from that script. We can discuss why in a bit. But I was so excited on one hand to see this movie because I knew what was going to happen. And then also a little disappointed when I ended up seeing the movie. Not because I knew what happened, but because when you see it on the screen, it's different than when you read it and you can see the potential for it. Mm-hmm. By the time we get to the end of the movie, I am convinced that things happened that other people aren't convinced happened. And we'll talk about that when we get there.
Okay.
But yeah, so I have a very deep connection to this movie for that reason. Did you know that 3 members of the original cast were in this movie when you went into it, or did you know it was a next gen?
No, I
movie?
knew that Kirk and Picard were in
gonna
this
meet up.
together because I've seen screenshots of them on horses out on Vasquez Rocks and things like that. So I knew that this was somewhat of a crossover. I did not know about the time jump.
The 78 years.
Yeah, that is still
You know that the
in my
next
brain.
generation is like the next generation, right? Well, not even. It's actually probably 2 generations later.
I
but
never thought about it
as
enough to realize something pretty significant has to happen, like a time jump or some time travel
yeah.
for them to be together. So that, I mean, we're definitely going to get into the trauma, the idea, the concept of somebody being stuck somewhere for
Yeah.
nearly 80 years and what that might be like for Kirk specifically.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. When we talk about it, maybe I'll save it for when we talk about it. But yeah, that would be interesting. The movie starts out with Kirk and Scotty and Chekhov joining the newly minted crew of the NCC 1701B, the Enterprise B, a ship that we have never seen before, except we have, because it's basically just the Excelsior again. It's the ship that you liked from Star Trek
I don't
6.
know. They all look the same to me.
Well, they do now. Well, and I should say this is an Excelsior class starship, so it is
Bigger.
No, it's basically the same model as the Excelsior. It's an Excelsior, whereas the Enterprise was a Constitution class. This is an Excelsior class, and so of course it's going to look the same, but it also saves a little money on.
You know, something
Models.
I did learn from this movie is that a Federation level starship is not to be trifled with. Like the class.
It took 7 minutes or 7 movies for you to figure out that a Federation starship is not to be trifled with.
The Klingons specifically said, yeah, we're not messing
Oh.
with this ship.
Right.
Because of its class.
Right.
And that was good context. That was helpful.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
It's a good plot.
Whereas the Federations haven't upgraded their birds of prey in.
The Klingons.
I mean, I'm sorry, the Klingons haven't upgraded their birds of prey in over 80 years because it's the same ship we've seen in Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4, Star Trek 5, Star Trek 6, and now Generations, which takes place 80 years later. When you've got a classic design like the bird of prey, there's just no need to change it, I guess.
Right.
These members of the original Enterprise, Kirk, Chekhov, and Scotty, show up to help christen the Enterprise B, helmed by Captain Harriman, John Harriman, played by
Alan Rook.
Alan Ruck, who folks would know from like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, etc. What did you think of this character? Because I have very specific thoughts about him that I've had for a very long time, but it was just recently confirmed when I read up on the making of the movie.
Alan Ruck.
that I was
the
right.
Captain?
Yeah.
The captain?
Yeah.
He seemed unready.
Yeah.
A lot of things unfolded when.
To be fair, the ship was unready.
No, well, the ship was unready. I feel like he was positioned at a disadvantage because here is this. This is the first voyage for this ship.
And it's not even really a voyage. It's just a sort of a lap that they're doing for the media.
And it's not ready.
Yeah.
They name some of the components, staffing, infrastructure that is definitely not yet
Present.
capable for an actual voyage.
Most things get there on Tuesday.
Everything gets there on Tuesday,
Yeah.
including the medical staff.
Correct.
So all of these comments or realizations that the veteran crew realize when they arrive are really kind of upsetting. You know, you don't have a medical staff. What was the warp? There was another incredibly critical piece of equipment.
When they had no they had no photon torpedoes.
Yes, yeah. So a bunch of things that were simply not ready, and it's just really unfortunate. The captain seemed like he was set up to fail.
Yeah. So one thought I had for a long time about this character, and maybe it's because I just know him as Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but when you see him standing in that monster maroon, it both fits him and doesn't. He looks so uncomfortable, especially having a living legend like James T. Kirk sitting there on the bridge, eyeing your chair for you. And we all know the story. Every time Kirk is not in command of a starship, he looks over at the chair, and within seconds, he's commanding that starship.
Well, he never can really retire.
Right. So
it's almost annoying, honestly. Like, you know, the moment he steps on the bridge,
yeah,
you're about to get into some serious S.
Yeah,
because he seems to bring drama with him.
Yes.
And within minutes, there's already an emergency.
There's drama.
Like red alert emergency, not something small. There is a literal ribbon warp that's attacking people, and these smaller ships are being destroyed, and they're immediately thrust into a conflict. I do want to say,
let me tell you what I thought about Harriman first.
Oh,
You're
right.
really completely skipping over.
I'm getting into the plot.
Yeah.
I did want to say I'm just interrupting you because I forgot to say this in the beginning of the show. There will be just a little bit of discretion here, a little bit of a content awareness for what's coming up. I will likely be talking very, very briefly about suicide on this episode. It will not be a major theme. I'll probably mention it when we go into talking about Data. So just a heads up, when we start talking about Data and his emotion chip,
okay,
I'll mention that. And as far as the rest of the show, I won't bring that up again. So just want folks to know.
So I appreciate that. Very quickly, my thoughts on Harriman is that are that he was probably some sort of trust fund, silver spoon baby, maybe the son of a politician who was seeing Starfleet as a step up, as a career booster. He's now the captain of a flagship of Starfleet, and it turns out that is 100% true. When Alan Ruck spoke to the producer Rick Berman about his character in this movie, that's exactly how he was described to Alan Ruck. Was this is going to be a character who really probably shouldn't be in this position and is just using it to gain some sort of status on his CV. And when you see his responses, specifically his looks to Kirk, when he asks Kirk, please take the chair, take the bridge, I'm going to go down to this other section of the ship, or please, Captain, do you have any advice on what we should be doing at this moment? Like, that is definitely the signs of like trust fund kid who has been given a position that he probably shouldn't have.
Right, and to Kirk's credit, he immediately thinks, sure, I'll take this as natural for me. I see you're in an emergency. You're not ready for this. I'll step into leadership. But then he changes his mind and says, no, I'll go down to deck 15 and figure out what the malfunction is. And you belong in the chair. You should be in the chair.
Yeah, you're the captain. This is your ship. I'm not going to take it over like I've done in the past.
The first theme around family comes up when we are introduced to Sulu's daughter, who's the helmsperson of this ship, and it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. This is, obviously a family career, but she is very foregrounded in this story and is a competent person on the bridge who clearly has some of Sulu's characteristics as far as their complete passion for this work, and the idea, of course, that Sulu had time to have a family comes up for Kirk.
Right.
And this is starting to give us these ideas or hints that it's one or the other, or the debate is, do you pour yourself into your work, or do you have a family, as if it's one or the other. And she is, for lack of better phrasing, evidence that you can do both.
Yeah.
It's not an either or. It's never been an either or. And that if you're passionate about your personal life, your relationships, your core values, you can have a family.
Yeah.
And
Kirk asks, when did Sulu have time for a family? Because as a captain himself, he knew that he never had time for a family. So he asks, and Scotty responds, you always said if something is that important to you, you find the time, which sort of stings Kirk, because it implies that he never had the time or never felt strongly enough about family that he made the time. I mean, it wasn't until David was well into adulthood and PhD level before he even met the kid. So, I imagine that stung quite a bit, especially after you've got a character that has lost a son.
Yeah.
More about Kirk in a little bit, because, well, we can talk about Kirk now because, as you said, he gives up the opportunity to take over command of the ship. He sacrifices himself by going down into this subsection of the ship in order to get a pulse beam of some kind out of the main array, the deflector dish, and push them back from this energy ribbon that's currently destroying the ship. He succeeds in doing so, but not without great loss, because the ribbon seems to almost come back out and swat at the ship, and it takes a chunk of the ship with it, including Kirk, and he is believed now to be dead. We fast forward 78 years. We are now inside the holodeck of the Enterprise D. We are promoting Lieutenant Worf to Lieutenant Commander in a ceremony. Data, once again, doesn't understand what it means to be human, doesn't understand simple sense of humor.
I don't know that it's simple sense of humor. Sense of humor is not simple.
Well, but Data doesn't have a sense of humor regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what you're getting at. Data is not programmed, and this is kind of key to the plot for him, his journey in this movie. Up till now, and we haven't talked about Data on the show, have we? This is our first.
This is our introduction to him, quote unquote, so to speak.
So Data, as I understand, is a sophisticated android.
Correct.
And doesn't have any programming for simulating emotions. I understand that there's no purpose of. I know there's other. I've watched enough Star Trek and Next Gen to know there's other androids like Data, and that he's. I am careful how I say this. He's special, but he's not unique. His programming is rather. It's not.
He is
I want to say
unique.
he's not uncommon.
He is very uncommon. There were basically two like him. Those are all, and they're all from the same family of androids. It's not like every ship has an android similar to alien. Synthetics aren't common.
Okay, so he's not the first of his kind, but you're telling me that he has unique programming.
Yes. I mean, without going too far into it, you've got Lore, his older brother, who was given human emotion and was a little too terrifying. And so a slimmed down version of that was given to Data. Data has spent 30 some odd years he's Pinocchio. He's spent all this time trying to achieve something beyond his programming. He's tried to observe humanity and try to figure out what it means to be human. So he is the flip side of Spock, who has no intention or desire to show human emotion. All Data wants to do is be a real boy. That's what he wants. And
he has programming that is much like artificial intelligence in the sense that it's iterative, that he has the potential to
Yes.
become more intelligent, to grow, to learn lessons.
he can learn lessons, but how he applies that knowledge is the difference between robots, AI, and humanity. Like, he's basically mimicking what he sees. He is not genuinely feeling any of those things.
And so that's where the lack of programming for emotions comes into play.
Yes.
In that the reason he can't grasp sarcasm, jokes,
Yeah.
humor. The example here is that Worf was on the plank. This is all in the holodeck, right? He's receiving an award.
Yeah.
He walks the plank. This is a kind of almost a ritual that they do.
Yeah.
And
Kind of a hazing promotion.
yeah, and they pull the plank and he lands in the water, and people find this funny. The ideas that Data can't grasp are that something that seems accidental
Or mean.
or dangerous or risky or mean can actually be humorous.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to just simply understand, then if I push the doctor off the ship, that's also funny.
It must also be funny, yes.
Which is kind of your point, which is learning is more about emulating and not so much a deeper consciousness.
Yeah.
Before people try to send me, what is it, Measure of a Man? I know.
We've seen it. You've seen it.
I know there's a debate around his rights and his relationship or his equality with humans or with people.
And the whole point of that episode 2, I mean, not the whole point, but the plot of that episode 2 was to what you were saying earlier. He is so unique that another engineer wants to take him apart to figure out how he works. Like, that's how unusual Data is in this particular point in time.
According to Gene Roddenberry, Data was to become, quote, more and more like a human until the end of the show, when he would be very close, but still not quite there.
Yeah. And that's true. He was, because it's up to this point, there have been 7 seasons of a TV series, and now we're at our first movie. And it's finally decided that this emotion chip, which he has played with before, and everybody agreed was a bad idea, he has now decided that because he doesn't understand, he feels like he has reached a plateau and kind of a wall. He can't go any further in his learning about what it means to be human. He now realizes, I need the emotion chip in order to truly understand what it means to have these feelings.
I found that scene to be troubling. Data and Geordi are looking at the emotion chip, which is this very small, like half-inch by half-inch little piece that is simply embedded into his mechanical brain. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated the moment that let us know this is a risky procedure. This will change his consciousness. Like, this will change how he feels about himself and others. And Right. Like,
and
how will this integrate into his system? And I think also there was a sadness around this, like the idea that he could no longer grow and adapt and learn without an emotional component. And a part of me, you know, as a psychologist, I agree with that. In order for you to, you know, fully grasp some lessons, for you to relate to others, use empathy, get into deeper, more complicated understandings, emotion is really critical. And up till now, he's just been kind of, I almost want to say like performing emotions.
Right.
Rather than really feeling them, integrating them, understanding them. And the sadness here is at least I'll speak for myself, I really like him as a character. And I felt like this was like naming a deficit. Like, you can't feel these things, and so therefore you're not good enough, you're not human enough, you're not enough. And that idea is, there's a sadness around that, like the way you were made. And this actually comes back later when LaForge is a prisoner, and he's also told, you're not normal.
Yeah.
You
You're
were
different, you're other.
were different. You were made in a way
Because he's blind and he has an eye, like he uses a special visor in order to be able to see, but he is othered in that moment. Yeah.
And so there's an element here that's almost like a side theme, which is, because there's some major themes here around consciousness and being able to enjoy life, which we'll get into. But this side theme of this movie is feeling like this otherness, feeling like you want to be more, or you're told you could be more than who you are. And the solution in Data's, in this example, the solution is, well, there's just this, it's simple. There's a chip that we could put in your brain, and you will be a better being. This will improve your experience, and it'll improve you as a person. And there's a sadness to that. Like, why can't you just be you?
But that's also Data's perception. Like Data, because even Geordi is concerned about putting the chip in. It's not like everyone's like, oh, you know what we should do? Pull out that emotion chip. Like, everybody's sort of concerned
no
about
one
the
is
emotion
pushing
chip.
This is his choice. This is his free will. No one is pushing this on him.
But you're also naming the reason why these 4 movies don't land with me is they are changing the characters so much. When you look at the 6 movies preceding this, and you've got characters that are pretty consistent. There might be gentle arcs that, you know, Spock is certainly different from the first time we see him to the last time we see him in the movie, but there is never that moment of, oh, you're now just completely different from what we have known and loved all these years. Whereas in this movie, the simple insertion of the emotion chip now gives us an entirely different character, in my mind anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of people would disagree with that. They would be like, no, it's the same Data. But I'm sorry, Data doesn't sing life forms, looking for little life forms. Like this isn't Data.
Okay, so let's
and
get
so
into
now
this.
and so now
Yeah.
you've got a completely different character simply because they were given a mandate either by the actor Brent Spiner or simply by the producer that we needed a comedic subplot for Data, and by making him crazy with emotions, he becomes laughable. He now becomes a comedic character.
Well, let me just say on the record, none of his new reactions, none of his new characteristics made me laugh.
Yeah.
The entire time.
In fact, some of them are terrifying.
No, I don't, and I think Geordi too was disturbed.
Geordi was more like annoyed.
Well, he eventually got annoyed because the jokes kept coming.
Yeah.
And a part of this felt irresponsible in the sense that this being has existed with a familiar system for 30 some years. Now you've introduced a pretty significant change to his functioning.
At a very crucial point too.
Oh, right. They're in crisis.
Yeah.
By the way, they're in crisis. This is not the time to experiment with the emotion chip.
Yeah, give it to him on shore leave. Let's not like need his services in stellar cartography, and he just gets super distracted and feels guilty. And
he has a range of emotions that I'd say are very normal given what he experienced. And as what that was is that he and Geordi were sent to the station.
Yeah.
And while they were there, they were attacked by Sauron, which we also need to talk about Sauron clearly.
You're saying Sauron as if he's from the Lord of the Rings.
I don't know how to pronounce his name.
He is
Sauron.
Sauron.
Soren. Like Soren over California.
Yes.
Soren,
Yeah, Sauron.
over California. Okay.
Yeah.
Soren ambushes them and gets beamed with LaForge to a Klingon ship.
Yeah.
Data and the rest of the crew get beamed back to their ship. And so Data experiences survivor's guilt because it's very likely that his friend will be, imprisoned, potentially tortured, and maybe even killed. He had the opportunity to save his friend, but he went into what I would consider a very natural fear response.
Yeah. He is terrified. I mean,
And he's never felt fear before.
He is cowering and saying, please don't hurt me. He is terrified.
This is kind of a freeze response. We've talked before about fight.
Is this freeze or is this fawn?
Freeze, fawn. Freeze is more of almost a paralysis, a sense of
Sure.
being unable to move, to think, to act.
Sure.
And when I say paralysis, I mean mental.
Yeah.
And fawn is a bit of giving in. And I don't like that language, but it's kind of like surrendering yourself is fawning.
By the way, you mentioned fawn during another during a project that we were working on together, and you've mentioned it here on this podcast.
What was the project?
The 3 featurettes for the Callisto Protocol. You mentioned fight, flight, freeze and fawn.
Okay.
And because a lot of people were like, what is fawn? The other day I was on the internet and recognized fawn literally in a video with a fawn. I had never actually seen it. I had always I have seen it, but I've never been able to associate it so directly before. And this was a video that everyone was commenting on being like super adorable, where it was clearly a mama in the distance and a fawn walking towards someone with a camera and being like almost, hey, who are you? And then it gets up much closer when it can actually recognize you're not mama, and then comes up to it and simply drops.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, it's adorable because now the human being can touch it and rub it. Like,
it's probably terrified.
It's begging for rubs. And in reality, it probably was confused, walked up to this being, went, oh, and instead just collapsed. And I was like, oh, why are you people saying this is adorable? Like, this is fawn. Like that.
Yeah.
That deer is terrified right now.
Well, and also, fawn is often used as a term to describe ongoing trauma responses, like being a people pleaser and being agreeable and being soft and gentle and trying to come across as, again, in a very, in a surrender, in a way that you want to be treated with calmness. So you present with calmness. You avoid conflict, you avoid strong reactions. And so it can be almost a chronic response over time. But here, so why I said this was irresponsible is that here's why I'm mad at this. We give Data the chip, the emotion chip, but we don't give him any guidance, counseling, explanation, anticipatory kind of like like we're not very informative. We're not saying, hey, you got this chip. Where's the manual that comes with this chip? Like, hey, by the way, this, what these emotions are textbook wise, but when you feel them, here are the additional things that are going to happen to your body.
Geordi should not be the one walking him around 10 forward. It should be Troy. Like Counselor Troy should be the one walking him around everywhere.
His first strong experience is with
This is what bothers me.
the alcohol,
Yeah.
the drink that he's given by Guinan, and he doesn't like the drink, and he's experiencing disgust for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah.
And
although
he's
Guinan
reactive.
says it looks like he hates it, and Data responds, "Yes, I hate it. I hate this." And I'm like, really? The first emotion we're going to watch him revel in is hatred. Like, even though it's a bit hyperbolic to say that he hates that
It's
beverage.
probably more like disgust.
Correct.
Yeah.
The fact that he says it, and I'm like, oh, so it's not like we didn't give him ice cream first and have him say, oh, I love ice cream. The very first emotion you give to a being that has never experienced true emotion before is what he now perceives as hatred. I was like,
we didn't know
this
he
is
was-
so irresponsible.
Yeah, I think that was meant for jokes.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Things get a little scary though. He starts to experience humor, and he becomes a jokester and a clown, and it's uncomfortable. No one likes to see. I don't know. Seeing Data like this is very off-putting.
You mean using a tricorder as a puppet?
Yeah, it's weird, and I got a very uncomfortable sense. Like, this feels manic to me. This
Yeah.
feels uncomfortable. This is beyond his normal level of, certainly it's true, it's beyond his normal level of emotions. He goes into such heightened emotions that I think our natural response is to feel like on guard. Like, when is this peaking? Is he going to go into risky behavior? Is he he's overwhelmed? And sure enough, he does get overwhelmed. And the emotions that overwhelm him are the emotions of survivor's guilt,
Yeah.
and trauma and sadness of his friend being taken and put into harm's way. And one of my favorite scenes, though, is when Picard asks Data to help him in the cartography room or whatever, and he's
Stellar cartography.
looking up some stuff, and he pauses, and I'm wondering if you can play this reaction where
Yeah.
it's a really, I thought this was a really thoughtful script here, where Data acknowledges he cannot concentrate on his task because these feelings of survivor's guilt, remorse, and sadness overcome him.
Yeah, here we go.
Data. You all right?
No, sir. I am finding it difficult to concentrate. I believe I am overwhelmed with feelings of remorse and regret concerning my actions on the observatory.
What do you mean?
I wanted to save Geordi, but I experienced something I did not expect. Fear. I was afraid. I cannot continue with this investigation. I wish to be deactivated until Dr. Crusher can remove the emotion chip.
Are you having some kind of malfunction?
No, sir. I simply do not have the ability to control these emotions.
Data, I have nothing but sympathy for what you are feeling. But right now, I need you to...
Sir, I no longer want these emotions. Deactivating me is the only viable solution.
Part of having feelings is learning to integrate them into your life, Data. Learning to live with them. No matter
Sir,
what the circumstances.
I cannot.
You will not be deactivated. You're an officer on board this ship, and I require you to perform your duty. That is an order, Commander.
Yes, sir.
He sort of snaps out of it when his realization that a commanding officer is telling him, no, you need.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I see.
But I mean, like, Data would want to be as useful as he has ever
Right.
been. And it's that moment of, hey, we all have days. You need to leave it at home.
Picard, I thought Picard did a good job here. I will say, and this is how I'm linking this to thoughts of suicide. Data recognizes that his emotions are so intense that the feelings of guilt and shame are so strong, he would rather be basically taken offline.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I bring this up is that there's this element here. It's this experience that a lot of us have around distress, that when it's so overwhelming, sometimes we do have thoughts like, I can't really push through this. And this is one of the reasons why people start to think about suicide, is the emotions are too intense. The pain is relentless. And here Data offers up this insight with his friend, with Picard,
Right.
by stating the emotions are intolerable. Like, I can't hold on to the intensity of this pain. I need it to end. And the only solution I have realized is that you unplug me, basically.
Yeah.
Now with Data, we know what he's kind of saying is, take me offline until you can figure out how to get this chip out.
Right.
But the analog to human suffering is, if you take me offline, this pain will end. It's a very, what I just found that scene to be very heartfelt and very serious. And you're right that Picard manages to get him out of that thought pattern and encourage him. And where I'll agree with you is that he encourages him with values that Data cares about, like, your commitment to this crew, your commitment to being in service, things that you do care about deeply. Can you focus on that?
Right.
And he does. And he learns one of his most valuable emotional lessons, which is, I do have control over my emotions.
Yeah.
I can overcome this. I can manage through. And I think something that's really, really critical here in these lessons learned is that this feeling does not last forever.
Right.
And it doesn't. And he gets through it.
In such a short amount of time, he says, because at the end of the movie, when they're looking for Spot in the wreckage of the Enterprise D, he says that he has experienced 261 individual emotions. And now he believes that he's got a wide enough spectrum that he can navigate them well. And then immediately starts to cry upon seeing Spot, finding Spot alive and well. And of course, those are happy tears, but he doesn't understand that yet. So he's already experienced 261 emotions, but is still experiencing new things, as if to suggest, no, that's not all you will experience.
Well, I mean,
and Troy is the one he's talking to, and Troy's like, he's like, maybe the chip is broken, and she's like, no, I think it's working pretty well. Like she is there in that moment to give him what he needs. I appreciate Troy in this movie because she is usually given short riff in Next Gen episodes. She just sort of sits there and states the obvious, like, oh, that captain over there is being deceitful. Yeah, we got that. Thanks. Why don't you just sit down? Like that's what an empath does, is simply tell us what we can already tell, across view screens. But in this movie, she instantly on the bridge of the big wooden vessel of the Enterprise on the holodeck, she instantly recognizes when Picard is traumatized. He gets a message and begins to read it, and you see the breath just leave his body, and she instantly picks up on that. And as a Betazoid, she can feel it, and then later, she is the one he opens up to about the loss of his brother and his nephew in a fire, and the ending of the Picard family line. She is there to act as counselor, and I really, really appreciated that they gave her all of these human moments, even the one with Data at the end of the movie. When he's not human.
Right.
But is becoming more and more like a human. They figured out a way to make Deanna Troi useful as the ship's counselor in this film.
Absolutely. I really liked her in this film.
I wanted to ask you about
Yeah,
that.
no, I
as,
thought-
as a counselor
I
yourself.
would
in many
actually
ways.
say I wish she was more like she had more scenes, more
Oh,
exchanges
yeah.
in this film, and I think going back to Data too, and their one of their final exchanges, my understanding is that he still has the chip, like he
Mm-hmm.
keeps the emotion chip.
It has been fused with his neural net. You really can't remove it at this point. So sorry, gang, you're stuck with it for another 4 movies plus 3 seasons of the Picard
I would
TV
not.
series.
I don't know that he needs that.
Yeah.
Again, I go back to saying Data had value and purpose and was a good part of the team
Yeah.
and had lots of characteristics that were advantages when it comes to getting people out of trouble and being, again, a valuable member of the crew. So I don't know. And I love his relationship with Geordi. They're friends and they're companions and they have these adventures. The little I've seen of the show, I understand that they're buds.
But they are both seen as the other. I mean, you mentioned
Right.
it a moment ago, and that's another one of the things. Like, it didn't happen in this movie, but it should not be a surprise to anyone that the visor that he had for 7 seasons and a movie then disappears. They didn't give him eyes, and you're like, well, now you've just kind of taken Geordi away a little bit. Not that the visor is his personality, and not that the fact that he's blind is his personality, because it's not. But you keep,
It's ableist.
you keep telling us
Yeah.
that you need to look and feel like everyone else in order to be, normie, Data needs to be able to feel like human beings. Geordi needs to be able to see. Like he needs to be able to walk around without a visor on his face. And I realize that these are actor things. Like, LeVar Burton hated that visor. You couldn't see in it. I get it. I get that that's where he is. But from a storytelling perspective, I feel like you just keep changing these characters.
Yeah,
You
I
keep
think-
giving us messages that are wrong.
I think to your point, exactly what you just said. I think to your point, had this movie ended with maybe Geordi figuring out how to get the emotion chip out and Data not losing those memories. I mean, we sort of have this, what's that movie? Charlie.
Flowers for Algernon.
Yeah, like we sort of had this idea like, well, is he going to remember? Maybe that was an original part of the script and is really faulty. Like, do you remember that you had those deeper desires and experiences, or do you sort of cauterize those memories and then you have very little understanding of what just went down?
Yeah.
But I think there may have been a way for them to take the chip out and recognize that you're fine the way you are. You don't need this chip.
I almost feel like that does become a Flowers for Algernon situation. And I would never then dream of, like, at the end of the movie, now that he has figured out how to navigate emotions, I feel like it would then be cruel to take them away from him.
Yeah.
But the fact that he felt that he needed it in the first place is also cruel. I mean, you've now given a character this overwhelming feeling of not belonging.
Yeah, I mean, but just for the record, I don't think it's funny to pull the plank on Worf and have him fall into the ocean anyway.
Well,
Let me just say that is not funny to me.
which we should say was a Riker move, and it's a total Riker move, simply because the idea, for folks who haven't seen the movie, the idea was that in this hazing promotion, they are giving him the rank of lieutenant commander. They put the plank out, they lower a hat that has his rank on it, and the idea is that you jump up and grab the hat from the plank. You then land back on the plank, and if you can steady yourself, you win. Except no one has ever done it successfully. Everyone's always ended up in the drink. And when Riker says, "Don't worry, no one's ever done it successfully," and then Worf does, Riker's like, well, that's no fun. And then says computer removed blank. You know, and then it is kind of funny because you're on the holodeck. There are protocols. He is in no danger whatsoever, except apparently he wrecked his knee. But yeah, he then falls. Now, it's a very Riker move. But just to give a little context behind it, yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of funny to see an angry Klingon in the water is kind of funny, but everyone's
So,
having a good time.
Well, I wasn't having a good time. So, okay, talk about Soren with he is a dude that can live upwards of 300 years, which is really important.
He's an Elorian,
Yeah.
similar to Guinan. Well, not similar. He's identical in race, in being to Guinan. So yes, they live a extraordinarily long time. It's why they're so wise and learned and smart. He is clearly a doctor. In his past, his planet was invaded by the Borg, and the majority of their population wiped out, including his wife and his children. And then they were all on this transport, 78 years ago, and they are caught up in this temporal nexus. It's an energy ribbon, and they are phasing in and out of existence. And the Enterprise B does what they believe will help them. Scotty is able to beam 47 of them out of 151 people on board. It's then understood that we all did a good job. Meanwhile, he is begging to go back. His ship's been destroyed, so everyone's looking at him like he's crazy. He's clearly gone through a traumatic event. I should say that. They're not looking at him like he's crazy. They simply don't understand what he's saying, because this would be like anyone in a situation where your ship or your home
you're
or your
ripped away from your family, your home. Other people didn't survive this.
Everything blew up, and now you've got a person saying, "I've got to go back, send me back," and everyone's like, "We don't know what he's talking about," so they sedate him. Well, now after 78 years, he has devised a plan to get back to the Nexus. And I should play this little piece of audio here because it's Guinan explaining to Picard what the Nexus is. Let's take a listen here.
The energy ribbon that destroyed that ship was not just some random phenomena traveling through the universe. It's a doorway to another place that we call the Nexus. And it's a place I've tried very, very hard to forget.
What happened to you?
It was like being inside joy. As if joy was something tangible and you could wrap yourself up in it like a blanket. And never in my entire life have I ever been as content.
And then you were beamed away from there.
Pulled. Ripped away. None of us wanted to go. And I would have done anything to get back there.
So if you were ripped away from your idea of heaven, how would you feel? Is essentially what she's saying. She's warning Picard that this is a guy who's incredibly dangerous because he will now do anything to go back to the euphoria that was inside the Nexus. And that's basically Soren. I mean,
Soren's plan is to use this laser to destroy a star.
It's a rocket, but yes.
Okay, to destroy a star that would ultimately shift the temporal ribbon onto a planet that he can essentially use to board the ribbon, right? So
so his plan has been to keep destroying stars He keeps talking about his research, and the reason that he's doing it is by destroying the stars. He is now shifting the direction of the ribbon. He is steering it,
Right.
and he's got to do it over a certain course so that it hits this one planet, Viridian 3, that he has set up a platform on to intercept the ribbon. So, and the idea is that you just can't fly a ship into it because the ship will probably collapse and explode. Like you're more likely to die trying to get into the ribbon.
So the reason why we're keeping him from his utopia is that destroying stars has sort of this ripple effect
He's
on
now
planets.
Yes, he has now been Borg-like in that he is now willing to wipe out millions of people, genocide, just to get to where he wants to go. That being said, Picard even mentions at one point, well, we could think of another way to get you there. Like, I'm not against letting you go into the ribbon.
I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Why are we just let him board the ribbon?
Yeah.
He becomes less of a problem.
Yeah. Let us figure out a way to get you back in there without you destroying these planets. But at this point, Soren's like, I've been doing this 80 years. There is no other way. If there were, I'd have figured it out by now. Don't you worry, I got this.
Yeah.
And so that's your character. But when they originally decided to make a movie, they were given a couple of parameters, and one of them was to give them a Khan-like villain. And I do think that's the smart move, because now you've got a brilliant scientist who is doing something for what he believes are the right reasons. And he is genuinely able to kind of outwit Picard and crew of the Enterprise, similar to the way Khan was with Kirk. I do believe that Soren is a good nemesis for Picard. And I wish we had gotten a chance to see him again.
He's not in Nemesis?
And I'm not convinced. No, he is not the nemesis in Nemesis. You know who is? Little Picard.
What?
Forget it.
Oh, I'm definitely. I'm going to continue to watch the movies, even if we're not covering them. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a switch. There's a negotiation, and LaForge is returned to the ship, to the Federation ship, and Picard
beams down to Viridian 3.
Volunteers to switch with him so that he's essentially the hostage.
But it's with a very specific purpose of being able to spy on the Enterprise, because and I don't know how much we want to get into it necessarily, but the Duras sisters, who are Klingons that we've been introduced to before in Next Generation, they need to know what the frequency of the shields are so that they can destroy the Enterprise once and for all. And succeed, by the way. And that's why Geordi was sent back to the Enterprise so willingly. Like
So there's just a camera in his visor, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Soren manages to board the ribbon. Now Picard does try to stop him.
Yeah.
By crawling through the Vasquez rocks.
Not Vasquez rocks. We should say that. The movie was
what?
The exteriors were done in Lone Pine, California, and the Valley of the Fire State Park, Nevada.
Okay.
Because those rocks don't really look like Vasquez rocks, but it is very rocky. It's very Star Trek.
Okay. There was a lot of Star Trek that was filmed in Vasquez.
Oh, there's
rocks.
a lot of Star. I said it's very Star Trek.
Okay. So they both board the ribbon.
Yeah.
And this is where things get dreamy. Like, things are all taking place in the Nexus. My understanding is your experience of the Nexus is a bit of what you dream it to be.
Yeah, we just played the audio from Guinan, basically saying it's heaven, it's pure joy, it's just
But
this
it's
euphoria.
what I'm saying is it is subjective.
Correct.
So Picard's
It's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. So this heavenly place. Here's what I will equate to. It is what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness for Picard is Christmas time with many children, opening gifts, and a family and a wife.
Currently, like if this had been yesterday, probably not. But because it's today, it is. Because at the very beginning of the movie, we learn, and this is a really big deal that we should talk about, the Picard family line has now ended. Picard never had a family, and he's far too old now to start one. Picard chose the Federation and Starfleet to be his family because he always knew that there was a safety net for the Picards. He came from a long line of Picards who were famous for one thing or another. People who had populated Mars or, helped colonize Mars.
Sure.
People who had won Nobel
Scientists,
prizes.
yes.
Scientists and famous writers, etc.
I think,
And-
look, like I understand, but
Well,
my sense of Picard is that having a family up until this point was not a
important.
priority.
Correct. But at the beginning of this movie, we find out that his brother Robert, who had a son, his Picard's nephew, Rene, the two of them died in a fire back on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And he now realizes what mortality means. So this is going right back to the Kirks and the Star Trek movies, mortality.
Yeah.
Facing death for the first time, fully understanding what it means. This is now what Picard is doing. Picard has never wanted a family, has never particularly liked children. He got better over 7 seasons,
Yeah,
but
which
he
is
never
why,
really
which
liked
is
kids.
why it's a little odd to see him. He lights up with these young children in their little Christmas.
Yeah, he's like, these are my
outfits.
kids.
He's,
They're all calling
he's
him
just
daddy.
truly,
and-
he's happy. And
Oh, papa.
this is a bit of a projective test in the sense that
Yeah.
this ain't no lies here. What in your heart will make you happy is what the Nexus will give you. So I'm not suggesting this isn't true. I think what I'm saying is I'm surprised that this scene is what makes him happy.
Well, except it's also what makes him realize it's not real. Because if you said, we're just going to put you back on the bridge of the Enterprise where everything's cool, he may not have figured it out.
Yeah.
But because he's like, this isn't real. I don't have kids. Like, he realizes that, yes, in this moment, this is why I believe, no one's really ever talked about this that I know of, but I believe that the Nexus is sentient. I believe that the Nexus is able to take you in, read your mind and your feelings, and give you the thing that supplements what you are currently missing. And right now, he is in a state of trauma. He's in finding out that his only remaining family are all gone. He is the last Picard that will ever live. And that to him is crushing. So in that moment, the Nexus is going to pick up on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying, and that's why I say it's a projective test.
Yeah.
Earlier, when he learns that Rene and Robert have died, he's very. I've never seen Picard. I'm not talking about the current shows. Right?
Right.
The show Picard.
Up to this point, you have not seen it.
in Next Gen, I've never seen him so emotional, so overwhelmed with this kind of personal loss.
He breaks down and cries. That moment where he's describing Rene, his nephew, and he's talking about how he's the antithesis of his father, who was a bit bullish and had tempered himself in his later years, but Rene, on the other hand, was so gentle and so kind and so curious about life and about the stars, and wanted to go to San Francisco to visit Starfleet and see Starfleet for the first time. When he breaks down and starts crying and says, he was so gentle. You've not seen that Picard before.
No, and I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked that he is I think what you said is really true here. He's in crisis.
Yeah.
He's having this personal loss. And around that same time, he goes into this, I'm calling it an experiment. I'm calling it a projective test. I'm calling it, you're saying it's sentient. I'm agreeing that this is a subjective experience. And it is so, it's so savory. It's so wholesome. It lacks anything negative, to the degree that Picard realizes this is a facsimile. This is something.
Yeah.
There's something odd about this, and you're right. He picks up on that. Guinan shows up.
Yeah.
And kind of tells him, you're not wrong. I'm here too. And I think there's this idea that, or this desire, this indulgence, this seduction of, you can stay here and this could be your life. There's no threat at the end of it. It's not like, oh, this is going to end bad. No,
I'll give you whatever you want.
No, there's no end to this. There's an infinite capacity here for happiness, and Soren explains that as well. When you get in there, you're not going to want to leave. Now, we never get to see Soren's version of the Nexus,
But we imagine it has to do with his wife and children.
right. Meanwhile, or maybe I should say, shortly after, we encounter someone else who's been in the Nexus.
Okay, so let's get into it. It's at this point that this discussion could take two different directions.
Okay.
One is that everything that we see from here on out is exactly as presented to us. Or Picard never leaves the Nexus, which is 1,000,000% the direction that I go in. I cannot fathom that Picard has left the Nexus by the end of the movie. So Guinan, in a very important conversation, and I've got it here because I'm primed, I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Guinan explains the rules
Now,
of the Nexus.
Brian, this is your dissertation. You really have to defend this, because
I've got no problem doing
I
that.
may collude with you.
Okay.
Right?
I have footnotes. I have a bibliography at the end of everything. I know.
All right, serve it.
So he ends up in the Nexus. The Nexus has clearly read him and is giving him what he needs, which is a family. He realizes that it's not real. Guinan shows up, and Guinan explains. Hold on. Let me play this for you.
Okay.
I think that's very important. Let me play it.
This can't be real.
It's as real as you want it to be.
Guinan.
What's going on? Why am I here?
You're in the Nexus.
This is the Nexus.
For you, this is what you wanted.
But I never had a home like this. Not a wife and children. But these are all mine. Guinan, what are you doing here? I thought you were on board the Enterprise.
I am. I'm also here. Think of me as an echo of the person you know. A part of herself she left behind.
And the Enterprise B beamed you up from the Lakul.
Papa, help me build my castle.
Yes, I will in a few minutes.
Papa, thank you for the doll. She's very beautiful.
These are my children. These are my children.
Of course. Time has no meaning here. So you can go back and see them born, or go forward and see your grandchildren.
Guinan, can I leave the Nexus?
Where would you go?
I don't understand.
Well, as I said, time has no meaning here. So if you leave, you can go anywhere, anytime.
All right, I know exactly where I want to go. To the mountaintop on Viridian 3, just before Soren destroyed the star. I have to stop him. But I need help. Now, if you were to come back with me, together
I can't leave. I'm there already, remember? But I bet I know someone who can.
So Guinan has explained that it's not Guinan that we know and love. It's a residual Guinan. It's a ghost Guinan, a piece of her that she left behind inside the Nexus, because within the Nexus, time and space mean nothing. So even though you ripped her out, she's also still in there. She explains, or he asks, as we just heard, he asks, can I leave? She never says yes. She simply says what the Nexus would say. Where would you go? What can I give you to make you feel like you've left, like to make you happy?
Okay. So
I would go back to right before Soren launched the rocket.
Okay. So let me just summarize this.
Yes.
Picard is saying, I desire more. Guinan is saying...
Picard is saying, I want to leave.
Right. I desire more.
Yes. Yeah.
Something's unfulfilled.
Correct.
There's more to do.
Yep.
To make me happy.
Yes.
Guinan says, I can help you with that.
Guinan says she can't help him with that, actually.
Well, Guinan says there's someone you should meet.
Well, Guinan there said... Guinan there in the audio said, I can't help you because I'm not here. Mm-hmm. I'm on Viridian 3, but I think I know someone who could. And so instantly he's transported to Kirk, who is chopping wood out in a cabin somewhere. We know from Star Trek V that he loves the woods and the wilderness. He likes climbing the rocks.
Oh, that's right.
But we are presented with a Kirk that we've never seen before. This is a Kirk who is giddy over the fact that Antonia, some woman we've never met before, is upstairs waiting for her favorite eggs. And this is the day that he told her that he was going to go back to Starfleet. So it was a bad day, but he's being given an opportunity to repeat the day and do it right.
This is a do-over.
Correct.
This is a morning after eggs.
Yes.
Benedict do-over time.
Although they've clearly been together for quite some time, because he says that, this was 7 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
This was 7 years ago. So presumably after Star Trek VI at some point. And he had met her a couple of years earlier than that. So because then as he walks upstairs with the eggs and the breakfast, he walks through the door and he ends up in a set of stables for horses. And he's like, oh wait, now we're 2 years earlier than that. This is the day I met her. Oh, this is going to be good. There's going to be some sexy time because we're all going to be on our horses and, whatever. Now, the question is this really Kirk? Or is it simply, for me, the question is this really Kirk? Because he's not saying the things that Kirk has always said.
This is Picard's projection of Kirk?
I believe that it's probably actually the Nexus projecting Kirk to Picard. I think Guinan was the Nexus.
All of this is the Nexus.
The Nexus is able to read Picard. What am I going to want to see and hear? I'm going to want to see and hear an old friend. No problem. She's been here before. Mm-hmm. I know who she is. I know how to operate her. I'm going to have her say all the things she needs to say to you to make you believe that you're getting what you want. Then I'm going to introduce you to an icon who also happens to be here. Whether this is actually Kirk or not is entirely irrelevant, because this being, Kirk, is meant to define the rules of the Nexus. And he does so by jumping on a horse, jumping over a ravine twice, and saying, I must have done that 50 times over the course of my life, and it terrified me every time, but not now. And that's because I know it's not real. Therefore, we need to leave. So what the Nexus / Kirk has actually just told Picard is as long as you feel scared, as long as you feel like you're not in a happy place that is just going to pump you full of euphoria, as long as you feel normal, you must not be here. We have no idea if Kirk felt terror. We don't even know if that ravine ever existed. We only know that the Nexus is providing rules for understanding what it means to be here and think that you're not. And so he's like, oh, well, then let's go. You know, this wasn't terrifying to me. So let's go.
So, by the way, you're passing your defense so far. But I'm noticing, so there are a couple of things. When I realized Kirk is there, the way that I interpreted this was really upsetting. You've been there 78 years.
But he doesn't know it. He feels like he just got there.
He feels like he just got there.
Yes.
And I want to talk about this in a bit. The idea of being kind of like hooked up to a pleasure machine or hooked up to, your consciousness makes you think you've only been there a little bit. Or
I'd like to be hooked up to a pleasure machine.
Well, hold that thought.
Okay.
And the idea that almost 80 years ago, he was lost to this disaster and
believed to be dead and in the history books as having died.
And mourned for, and all this time goes by.
Probably has a statue somewhere.
And he's actually, so here's what terrifies me. The idea that his soul is stuck in this ribbon this whole time. And that he's made to believe that this is real. So it's the...
Well, you say whole time though, like he feels like he just got there. So it's
I know, but in real time, in our time, he's been there. His soul has been there 80 years.
Yeah.
And the reason that disturbs me is that manipulation. It's a strong word for it, but that's where I'm going with this. Is like that's what upsets me, is that he is isolated in this fantasy, in this manipulation that he doesn't know he's in. He doesn't have the consciousness of knowing he's in there.
Yeah, but until Picard comes and ruins it for him, he's exhilarated by it.
Well, and so that's the other thing, is that I'm kind of siding with you in that he would be far more troubled.
Yeah.
Probably traumatized if someone were to come in and tell him, yeah, no, you're right, this isn't real.
Yeah. He would try to figure out a way to get out.
Well, yes, but he would also need to take a pause at like, wait a minute, how long have I been here?
Yeah.
None of this is real. Antonia's not real. Like there's just this whole sense of disillusionment that can be incredibly traumatic. That's what I'm naming here.
And by the way, similar to Picard feeling like he needs a family, that's presumably why, because the Kirk we all know would have been transported back to the bridge of the Enterprise. Because even in the beginning of the movie...
That's what I was thinking.
But
why does he go?
No, but here's what they did. Here's the cleverness of the writers.
Okay.
They set this up in the beginning because he says, when did Sulu have time for a family? Implying, I've tried and I didn't succeed. I didn't have time. I had to come back. I had to do this. And Scotty's like, well, that's your fault, man, because Sulu found time for it. And now he's being given an opportunity to be with Antonia, presumably the love of his life, not go back to Starfleet. And when Kirk's like, but you're a Starfleet officer, you have a duty. And Kirk's like, nah, they all think I'm dead. So I'm going to go start my family. I'm going to go be happy the way that Sulu was able to be happy and to have that work-life balance. But this is a Kirk that is completely foreign to us. This is a Kirk that we have never met. This is a Kirk we have never seen, because the only Kirk we know is the Kirk that wants to be back in the chair. We've just spent 6 movies.
Can I ask you this? Are you saying that your interpretation of this is that James T. Kirk perished almost 80 years ago?
No, my interpretation is that Kirk is probably still in the Nexus somewhere, but that doesn't mean that they had to introduce him to Picard.
Okay, so you do think Kirk's in the Nexus?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. The same way that Kirk is, or the same way that Picard is. I feel like because we saw the ribbon reach out and swat at the Enterprise, and it took parts of it away.
That's even more upsetting. So he's
still
in the Nexus.
But Kirk is still alive.
So hold that thought. You call this alive.
Yes, well, in that he has not ceased to exist. He has not died. He is still there.
Okay.
Picard is still there.
Let's
And we
say-
know that because if you say that all of this on the surface is true and Picard and Kirk were able to get out and go conveniently back 30 seconds to the right before Soren launches the rocket, they are still alive. Like they are still corporeal and,
Right,
and
right,
there.
right.
So, but here's the thing.
They're no longer in limbo.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct. So the reason, so Kirk lays out the rules for believing that you're not in the Nexus, which is to say, as long as you experience trauma, as long as you experience pain, as long as you experience fear, as long as you experience love, as long as you experience life, you're not here.
Yeah.
And that is enough to convince Picard. And Picard's like, well, come help me. And Kirk's like, well, because I didn't feel scared, it must mean that we're in a fake fantasy land, and I'm going to go with you. And then what do? They ride their horses into a glowing white light, and somehow or another, they are back on Viridian 3, moments from the destruction of the planet. And that to me is too easy. Are you telling me that a human being can be sucked into an energy ribbon and commandeer it? It can make it, like, I understand that Guinan said, because we heard the audio, Guinan says time means nothing here.
Right.
She doesn't say, you know what you can do? You can literally rewind the ribbon from where it is.
Right, because
Like,
Picard decides, I want to go back to the exact point where I can fight Soren.
Which, by the way, is also stupid, because I would have said, if I really thought that this was going to be a thing, and this was going to happen, I would have said, you know what? Take me back to 10 Forward, where I was talking to him, and I'm going to arrest him.
Just have him.
Put him in the brig, and together we can figure out another way to achieve his goal. I am not going to go to 2 minutes before the rocket is launching so that I can go through another harrowing fist fight and potentially do it all over again. Like, I would not choose that moment to come back to.
Meanwhile, the Enterprise has disengaged.
It is
the disc,
saucer section
right?
from the
Like
rest
that all
of
happened. They crash land on the planet. It's people are injured. I'm sure there are some casualties. Like a lot of things happen. He could have prevented that.
He does say at the end, our casualties were light.
Okay.
He's very clear. But that little girl who lost her teddy bear would not have lost her teddy bear if he had just chosen to go somewhere else. The Enterprise D is destroyed only because he didn't choose to go back further.
Okay, so let's advance to the place where most of us think that Picard and Kirk are released from the Nexus.
Yeah.
Handle Soren.
Mm-hmm.
They manage to physically. There's a physical altercation.
Yep.
They manage to disable the
rocket.
The rocket.
By the way, I will say this. So you're about to lead up to a very important moment.
Okay.
What moment is that?
This is the moment where Picard and Kirk team up.
Yeah.
To disable this plan.
Yeah.
And Kirk unfortunately dies.
Right. So, let's talk about that for a second. Well, let's go back to Star Trek V. When Kirk, now I believe that, obviously this could just be one of those things, but Kirk was like, well, I knew I wasn't going to die falling from Yosemite, from
when he's free soloing up that mountain.
Yeah. He's like, because I always knew I was going to die alone, which you could say happened when he was down on deck 15. He was all by himself. He didn't have anybody. None of his friends were with him, whatever. You could say that is true. And by the way, people complain about his death scene. I love his death scene. when he looks into the other and his last words are, "Oh my," that to me, I think is wonderful. It might be one of Shatner's better performances because there is this sense of, is what he's looking at scary, or is what he's looking at wonderful, or is what he's looking at simply another adventure, the unknown? When he says it was fun, and then he just looks over to the side and you can see that he's not looking at Picard anymore. He's looking at something else and simply says, "Oh my," and then dies. That to me is Kirk. Like that's it. But when I first read the screenplay, that is not how he died. Soren shoots him in the back.
Oh.
And apparently test audiences were not happy about that. And they changed it before releasing it into theaters. But to this day, Malcolm McDowell says that he receives like death threats for being the guy who killed Captain Kirk. You know,
oh, I'm sure.
whereas in my view, he didn't.
Yeah. Here's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Kirk is on this metal bridge. There's like basically by this point, this metal bridge has collapsed. He has to jump onto the other side, onto the broken side of the opposite piece of the bridge. I thought you were going to say
further evidence that they're in the Nexus, but go ahead.
Well, I thought you were going to say he is an experienced climber and so should not have.
Well, but
like he should have figured out how to like jump onto the other side and climbed this rock.
Typically, the mountain would still be that, like it wouldn't be dangly, like when you're jumping onto. But the whole point of that moment, because you remember, he hesitates.
Right.
It's the ravine moment. It's the fear. He's feeling terrified the way that he always did jumping the horse over the ravine.
Okay.
And so now he realizes I'm alive and I'm in the real world.
Yeah.
Because I am terrified to jump from this dangly bit to that dangly bit. And then he decides.
Do it anyway.
And then he says, I'm going to do it anyway because he's Kirk. And so he does. He jumps over and successfully decloaks the rocket so that Picard can dismantle it. But if I were the Nexus and I were trying to provide visual evidence to Picard for why you're not here, I would make Kirk terrified of whatever he needed to jump over.
But Picard doesn't even see that this happens.
Doesn't matter. That's irrelevant because it's all about the world needs to look and feel in every way real. So that means even in a moment that you didn't necessarily see, Kirk was scared in this moment, jumped across, got the little device, and decloaked the rocket, giving you the opportunity to dismantle it and save the day. And by the way, if you look at the Nexus as a just wish fulfillment, the next 3 movies are nothing but Picard wish fulfillment. And by the way, I would say the next 3 seasons of Picard are wish fulfillment because he suddenly becomes an action hero. He is given an opportunity, spoiler alert, in the next movie, First Contact, he gets to kill the Queen Borg.
Oh my goodness. Why are you spoiling this
You've
movie?
seen First Contact.
Have I?
Yeah, you've seen it. And by the time you see it, you will forget that I ever even said anything.
Okay, so hold that thought.
He gets to shoot people with Tommy guns. But okay, go ahead.
Hold this thought. We will return to this. The Nexus. So I appreciate what you're saying, what the Nexus is to you.
Yeah.
The Nexus is what's known as the experience machine.
Is that a real thing?
Yes. The experience machine is a philosophical thought experiment that was theorized and written about by philosopher Robert Nozick in the 70s. And this is something that you may have, if you've taken a philosophy class.
I have.
You may recall this so-called experiment. It's been written about. It's been countered, and essentially, psychologists actually have run not this exact experiment, but some surveys, and have tried to replicate some of the findings here to better understand why many of us would refuse a Nexus experience. As we talk about the Nexus, think about this experience machine. I'm going to describe it to you. Okay. So imagine a machine that could give you any experience or a sequence of experiences that you might desire. When connected to this experience machine, you can have the experience of writing a great poem, or bringing about world peace, or loving someone and being loved in return. You can experience the felt pleasures of these things, how they feel, quote, from the inside. You can program your experiences for tomorrow, or this week, or this year, or even for the rest of your life. If your imagination is impoverished, you can use the library of suggestions, almost like a program, right?
So you're literally describing the holodeck.
Extracted from said biographies and enhanced by novelists and psychologists.
Okay.
You can live your fondest dreams from the inside. Would you choose to do this for the rest of your life? Would you choose to do this for the rest of your life? Yes or no? Now, let me just add a couple of caveats here. A lot of questions come up. People want to know, okay, what are the logistics? Is this technology? It really, truly is imagine your brain as being hooked up to a machine. So look, listen, the question is not whether to try the machine temporarily, but whether you enter it for the rest of your life.
So not to have real experiences, but have the feeling of fake experiences.
And upon entering, you will not remember having done this. You will not remember entering. So no pleasures will get ruined by realizing they are machine produced.
Okay.
So.
Wow, this really is, the Nexus really is.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is a coincidence. And
I wonder if Brennan Braga and Ronald D. Moore were familiar with the philosophy of the, what'd you call it? The experience machine?
Yeah. Ronald D. Moore for sure.
Maybe.
I give him all the credit. So the question comes to you now. Would you, now that I've described what the experience machine is, would you agree to it?
Yeah. Why not? If I'm being given the opportunity to live out all the best things about life and all the things I've ever wanted to do and not know that I had chosen to do this, why not? I mean, we're talking about the Matrix at this point, right? I mean, except in the Matrix, you don't know. In the Matrix, you're basically, for those people who took the red pill or whatever, the ones who can now do kung fu and the ones who can now do all this other stuff. I mean, why not? Why would you not choose to live your best life without hindrance forever? I mean, philosophically, and I understand it's a philosophical question. Philosophically, you'd be like, but I'm not actually experiencing life. But the whole point is, if they give you if the rule is you forgot that you made the agreement, then what are you complaining about?
Is that your final answer?
I forgot what you asked me because I entered the agreement.
It simply would be, would you have your brain hooked up to this machine?
Sure. I'm still trying to figure out the downside.
I don't know that there is a...
Philosophically speaking, there is no downside. It's just it's just a question of me versus other people.
Yeah.
Would you?
I would not.
Why? You're getting very ASMR now.
Well,
to some people, this is becoming an experience machine.
I've been persuaded by the research, unfortunately, but
I have not been given the research, so I'm.
So several studies suggest that the majority of people who are given this option, again, in a hypothetical survey type way, are averse to plugging in. Upwards of 84% of participants said no.
Why?
It has a lot to do with being pro-reality, our interest and need to be aware of our reality.
But the moment that you say yes and you get hooked up, you forget that it's not your reality. That's the key. If the question was, would you be willing to do this for the rest of your life, but there would always be that nagging feeling in the back of your head that that you were somehow missing out, that there was that you had FOMO, then the majority could say yes. But this sounds like it's more like people who are overthinking it. When presented with exactly the parameters, I would say, yeah, sure. Because I would forget that it's not my reality.
You're absolutely right. You would not be aware that that's not your reality.
Yeah.
And that piece is what makes people the most uncomfortable. It turns out that people are in favor of living in touch with reality. They feel like being in touch with reality has some kind of intrinsic value to it. It feels that is what is good for them. It feels that is what corresponds to their authentic well-being. Now, we also know, we've talked on the show about the value of having a variety of emotional experiences, lived experiences, negative and positive, right? Spock is a character who's taught us that. And I think some of our reactions come from the realization that, well, if we really deepen this consideration, in order for us to know what feels good, don't we sort of have to know what doesn't feel good?
No, you don't. You don't. Because if the Nexus tells you, because we'll just call for the sake of this discussion about this movie, we will say that the experience machine is the Nexus. If the Nexus is telling you that what you feel is pleasure, by the way, this is that philosophical question of, are we currently living in a simulation?
Sure. Of which I say, I really don't care.
Correct. That's the point. That's what I'm saying, is if you found out that your existence right now was a simulation, would you somehow be feeling FOMO for having not lived out in reality? No, because this is what you know. And so if in that moment you say, yeah, I'll do it, and you're destined to be a rock star, or you're destined to write the next, you're destined to be the next great poet laureate, or you're destined to be a filmmaker, or whatever it is, you are fulfilling dreams that you may not fulfill otherwise. And then it becomes about ego. Then it becomes like, well, I didn't really experience it. No real people saw my movie.
But when you're in the Nexus, you wouldn't even know. You wouldn't know that. Yeah.
You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And if you did know, the Nexus would send somebody like Steven Spielberg over to my house to be like, here are the rules for, you know what? I found out I was in Nexus too, but let's go out together and make a movie. And then the Nexus just like restarts. People, when I tell people this headcanon of mine, they're like, well, then are you saying that all these other great stories didn't happen? You know, the Dominion War,
they happened
Deep Space Nine
in his
didn't happen.
Mind.
Well, I think it's a combination. You don't have to say that those things didn't happen. What you're saying is, as the Nexus traverses the universe, it is picking up information from everywhere and constantly feeding. That's why I believe that Picard basically becomes a god within this Nexus, and maybe even begins to kill it, because it then spends all of its life and energy placating this one person inside of it that needs to believe that he's not there, which means you are going to create horrible things like the destruction of Romulus. You're going to give him guilt. You're going to give him a robot body. You're going to give him all these other things that are the give and take. And I believe that the experience machine would do the exact same thing. Not everything would be wonderful every day, but you would experience a lot of euphoric highs. Yeah, I would totally do it. In fact, you know what, Drea? Since we've been married,
Might you be in the Nexus?
I think I am in the experience
You're
machine.
so sweet. Let me just say.
But you wouldn't do it.
No, I wouldn't. But I'm actually going to use Star Trek as why. But let me give you, just as we wrap up the experience machine debate here, the fact that we are kind of debating it itself, it says a lot. There are, full courses that just stick to the analysis and considerations and thoughtfulness around why people would or would not hook their brain to a machine.
Are you telling me there's an entire course, like a semester-long course that's just about this?
This is an entire, yes, in a way.
I would take that class.
This is an entire, when I learned about this in college, we spent a few weeks just kind of reading the books.
That's 101 stuff. I want to get into the course that's
You're
just
right.
about this.
Yes. So there are decades of work that, I'm really not doing it justice by just mentioning in a few minutes what this is.
Sure.
But I do want to name that over the years, especially in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a new emergence of scholarship specializing in looking at the experience machine that questions the confidence about its ability to generate this, what's considered this knockdown argument against hedonism. Because for decades, this machine,
Figured it. That's why I want to do it.
It's yes, but
Hedonism.
Hedonism, you're right. But what I'm saying is the decades of research around this showed a very different response, not the one you're sharing. It showed that the majority of people did not favor hedonism. And this was meant to prove all sorts of different sub-theories about human beings and hedonism.
Right.
So it's as I'm saying, there's this group of anti-hedonistic scholars that were using this as a way to kind of justify why human beings aren't necessarily motivated by pleasure. And it gets incredibly complicated. Where I think this relates to, clearly the Nexus is a version of this. Mm-hmm. Picard, I wouldn't say Picard has the choice to, well, let me put it this way. He does have the choice. Seemingly, he has the choice to stay in the Nexus or leave the Nexus. And it's my understanding and my interpretation of the film, different than yours, my interpretation of the film is that he does leave the Nexus. I like what you're saying, and I think I'm now interpreting it as, yes, Picard leaves the Nexus, but Kirk, I don't know where Kirk is. I think you're right. I don't think that was Kirk.
Yeah, do you have to give him the real person to make him feel like he's with a person?
I fully believe now that is the Nexus's portrayal of Kirk that Picard needed to form whatever conclusion he needed to form.
Yes.
And yet,
you're saddened by the thought that Kirk is in the ribbon forever.
Well, I have to continue to believe your theory to believe that Kirk gets out of the Nexus, because what unfolds is Kirk and Picard get out of the Nexus, and Kirk is directly responsible for helping Picard kill
one last time
Sauron.
Yeah.
The end of this, the end of the experience on this planet, the exchange that Kirk and Picard have, for me, kind of tell the story of this film. Kirk asks Picard, did we do it? Did we make a difference? And Picard assures him that they did. And Kirk says it was fun. Mm-hmm. And you named this too, that Kirk dies here in a moment of interpretation, right? Like, is this exhilaration? Is this fulfillment? Is this wonder? Is this curiosity? There's so many things that happen here. How I saw this was the movie telling us the Nexus sounds like a great idea. The Nexus is a great idea. It is pleasurable. It is hedonistic. It is utopia. But it seems to me that what this is saying is it's better to live your life with purpose than live in a fantasy of the Nexus. It's better to be actively making a difference and having that reality of making a difference for real, really impacting people.
But again, if you don't realize it's not reality, you believe you are making the difference. You're still getting that same feeling of I am making a difference. Now I realize if you talk about hedonist as a glutton, as someone who
indulgence,
correct, someone who can't get enough of wonderful food or sex or music or whatever, like just someone who is just overindulging in. I mean, then I get
honestly,
that becomes a very
big part of the Nexus would be all the naps I could take because I feel so exhausted all the time.
By the way, ever since you said the word hedonist for the first time during the course of this podcast,
you think about that island.
No, it's occurred to me. I don't know what island you're talking about, but now I want to know. There is Malcolm McDowell, who plays Soren, also played Caligula, the ultimate hedonist. Oh, one day we'll pop it in the Blu-ray player. Okay. But I mean, like when you talk about like Roman emperors who are just hedonistic in every way, all of the killing, all of the food, all of the orgies, that's Caligula. And Malcolm McDowell is both in the Nexus and a Roman emperor who enjoys all the hedonistic stuff. I still don't see a downside to the machine because you don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree with you in saying The Matrix, the film The Matrix, not the book it's based on, is a version of this where people begin to debate with themselves. Would I choose to be hooked up to this grotesque alien machine, but I wouldn't know I'm there. I'm actually somewhere else.
And when you're unhooked, you're in an even more grotesque place. Like, really? I gave up my job and my girlfriend and my sports watching to live here? No. I can't. That's just me. I'm the hedonist. It's so interesting.
It's meant to be. This is the way this
philosophy works.
Yes, absolutely. It's meant to be deeply thought-provoking, and there are meant to be parts of this that make people uncomfortable, and it sparks debate. I find it interesting that the two of us are very different on how we would answer.
You could have asked me in the beginning, are we going to answer differently? And I would have said
you would not. Yeah. Yeah.
You're all about the data. You're all about the analysis. I'm more about the, let's do it. Let's jump in. I need the experience. Let's do it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying if you had asked me, will we feel the same way or differently about this? I would have said differently.
Okay.
But that's what makes it interesting. Like, you've got a completely different take on it than I am now trying to wrap my head around it. And
I think
that's pretty cool.
I feel like Picard made the choice, and you might think differently. I think Picard made the choice that most people would make. Most people. Now, again, when you're in the experience machine, you would not have any clue that it's not real, right? He has an inclination, so this is where it differs.
Suddenly his friends just start showing up in his house.
In his
Victorian era
He has
house.
an inclination that this is odd, it's not real, it's actually imperfect. But we relate to Picard when he leaves the Nexus and decides mortality is valuable to me. The experiences that I have with my friends are valuable to me. He even goes on to say at the very end of the film, that this villain had warned him that time is a predator who's just, stalking you, and time is catching up with you, and those anxieties you have represent this big threat. And Picard goes on to say, no, time is not a predator. Time is your companion. Time is on a journey with you. And what you do is so much more important. How you fulfill that experience is so much more important than these things that you leave behind.
Right. And what I would fill my time with is hedonistic stuff inside a place where I'm going to live forever. That's how I'm going to spend my time.
But see,
and then time is truly my companion.
And here's why I really like this movie, because this ties in to what we were talking about with Data. Actually, you're experiencing now all of these different feelings, these emotions, good, bad, confusing, complicated, and what ends up happening is that he finds value in all of it.
Yeah.
He realizes this is all a part of who I am. This is my reality now, and he accepts that.
Yeah. After this conversation, I'm liking this movie more than...
This is a great Star Trek movie. Am I in the minority here? Do people not like this one?
I don't think you're in the minority. I think a lot of people think highly of this film. I think most people think of the 4 Next Gen movies, First Contact is probably better. I don't care for any of them, really. But I also think it's a difference in... I like Harve Bennett and Nicholas Meyer, and they pieced out after 6.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're dealing with the next gen. Now we're dealing with Rick Berman and Michael Piller and Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga and those folks, like the folks who were running the TV series. And I like the cast of Next Gen a lot. I like their adventures, but I don't think they were given very good movies. And I think the box office shows. By the time we get to Nemesis, people are just like, let's just kill this franchise.
Oh, wow.
There was never a DS9 movie. There were never, people were just tired of it.
Just done. Well, I enjoyed it very much. I had a whole
Where
lot
would
of
you
fun.
rank it now in your 7 movie ranking?
I love this movie slaps. It does.
Is this about to take over motion picture for you?
No, I'm not sure. I feel weird ranking it with the others. It seems unfair.
And yet I can do it.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create a separate ranking.
So now it's at the top of
it's
the
number
other
1.
Yeah.
In a different category.
It's number 1. All right, cool. Well, then that's Star Trek, Drea. Are you excited about where the Nexus takes us next in our discussions of either Harley Quinn or X-Men?
I am. I'm excited to get into animated shows. Again, it's a little weird to not know, are we doing something more contemporary or something that we feel very nostalgic about?
If you were in the experience machine, what would give you the most pleasure? Because this will be coming out after the point in which you could affect
watching X-Men anime. That would be one experience in the experience machine.
Watching X-Men?
Yeah, because I've seen it. I haven't really seen a lot of the Harley
You've seen all
show.
of it? You've seen the whole series?
I don't know that I've seen the whole series, but I've seen the first season for sure.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, though.
Right. And it's been a couple of years since we've seen any episodes of Harley Quinn. I'm excited about either one. I'm very excited. So thanks for going on this journey with me, because this podcast has been going on for quite some time, and I always loved covering Batman the Animated Series, but I never grew up with Batman the Animated Series the way that you did. I never got to see the series through your eyes until we started covering it, and I know that you sort of feel the same way about Star Trek, that you always knew it was there, and you always, you'd seen a few episodes here and there, but you had never fallen in love with it. And now I feel like you've kind of genuinely fallen in love with Trek. And then I appreciate you going on this journey with me.
I'm excited to continue to see the films. I understand they're not going to get better.
I mean, we've got other TV series we can watch too. Like we can jump into DS9. We can jump into Voyager. You got some animated series that are good. There's good stuff out there, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you listeners for hanging out with us, and certainly all the ones who have let it be known that we were welcome in your space. It's been a great pleasure. Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find my website, drdreapsychology.com. That's where you can leave me a voice message. You can also find me on Threads and Instagram, Dr. Drea Psychology. Please check out the latest article I have up on Fandom. It's all about the psychology of Ethan Hunt, who is the star, well, who's played by the star Tom Cruise.
But he is the star of
He's the star of
IMF.
Mission Impossible. And I may have said this on air before, but writing an article about Ethan Hunt felt very much like writing an article about Tom Cruise.
I mean, yes. Yes, he's probably the closest to any character.
I will never write it. Clearly, it is not ethical, nor am I qualified. I do not know Tom Cruise. You'll never see me write an article about somebody who's real. But this was the first time I felt like, this is my observations about this fictional character carry over toward the observations we all have, or we all might have, about this real person.
Now I'd love to see you write an article about your observations on Far and Away, as directed by Ron Howard, starring Tom Cruise
that's not
and
happening.
Nicole Kidman as Irish people.
Okay. Where can folks find you?
You can find me. I am basically only on Instagram these days, B_Ward028. You can also join us on Instagram as at the Arkham Sessions. You can email us arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come join us on Facebook, over on Twitter, formerly Twitter, at Arkham Sessions. And then Patreon. And we've got to thank our patrons for making this episode and all of our episodes possible. Aaron Wenrick, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Kevin Ortel, Todd Stashwick, Heroes Journey Fitness, Frank Moeller, Mark Pepper, Swara Salih, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Eric O'Sullivan, John Henry, Dr. Girlfriend, and my father, Carl Ward. Thank you all once again. Go follow our family over at Fanbase Press. And until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I just saw that another word for this is Universal Pure Pleasure Machine. And I'm Universal Pure Pleasure Machine.
Is that patented? Could I start it? Could I create something called a Universal Pure Pleasure Machine? I mean, now you're just creating words that are even more what I would want to be a part of.
And I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
We make a difference.